Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is Noah Copeland.
Hello.
That's what Noah Copeland sounds like. What also someone else sounds like in the other room is doing a voice lesson, and so we're going to deal with that for a little while. Yeah. But that's okay.
It'll soothe the,
yeah.
the topics.
So, first of all, what do you do?
What do I do? Hot dang, what a question. That's the question I ask myself every day. Funny story, though. My roommate actually told me that the first semester that we roomed together, that it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, and I was asleep, and he was still up. And he says that I rolled over, looked at him, and asked, "What am I doing?" and then rolled back over. And he's like, "Noah, are you okay?" I have no memory of this.
Okay.
Never happened. So that's a question I ask myself even in my sleep.
Okay, well.
No, for real. So I'm currently a student at the Academy of Contemporary Music.
Yeah.
And I'm going for music production. My goal is to be a film and video game composer. I've already had some opportunities doing that. So that's really what I'm pursuing right now. So
awesome.
If I had to break down the great philosophical question of what do you do? Yes, compose. We'll stick with that among many other things. Yeah.
How did you first start in music, period?
Okay, so earliest musical memory was, you remember, thinking back to like 2001, you're a kid in Walmart and the demo GameCubes are like 10 feet above the controller. So you just sit there craning your neck the whole time. You play the demo and then walk away and be like, "Mom, I can't move my neck." Shut up, I'm getting groceries, stupid. So I saw Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the GameCube on there, and I was like, holy crap, that is incredible. And I loved the soundtrack. I would actually play that demo and just sometimes not even touch the controller, just let it there and just listen to the music because I loved it so much. So then later, my older brother, Seth, is wanting to... he sits down at the piano one day and plays our dad, a song that he wrote. And he turns to my dad and says, "Dad, I want to be a rock star and make millions of dollars." No joke, which apparently a Ray Manzarek from The Doors quote of what he told Jim Morrison. He's a huge fan of The Doors, so that makes sense. So then he's like, "Well, I need a band." So he says, "Noah, you should learn guitar." Since I play keyboards, is what my brother said.
Yeah.
So I started taking guitar lessons. My dad had an old Fender acoustic, and it's cool because it's like generations of the Copeland family have like learned on this guitar. Like he tried to learn on it, didn't exactly get much where. My cousin Scott had learned on it. Now I was learning on it. I just was at my grandpa just recently passed away. We were at his funeral, and I was looking through this. We were working on this slideshow, and we found this old picture of Grandpa with a guitar sitting there. That guitar? Like, it wasn't that guitar, but it was with a guitar. And I'm just like, man, we've been doing this a long time, haven't we? I thought I was doing something original by playing it. It's just family tradition.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started taking guitar lessons from there. And my brother bought Back in Black by AC/DC. And I heard that album, and I'm like, good gosh, that is the noises. The noises I want to make, those are those noises.
Yes.
That's it. So I took guitar lessons and tried very hard to learn how to play like Angus and Malcolm Young from AC/DC, and then, Eddie Van Halen and whatever. And I kind of went for that for a while with trying to be in a rock band and make millions of dollars or whatever the pipe dream was. In Indiahoma, Oklahoma, a town of 300 people, that's definitely going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So we do that for a while, and then for 4 years, and then we kind of break up and kind of, go our separate ways. And I'm trying to figure out, again, what do I do? What am I going to do? And I decided that I needed to come to a school like ACM that was focused on music. Because I was currently in college, but I was studying like broadcast journalism. And I was sitting there going like, I'm not enjoying this. And if I don't enjoy this in college, I'm not going to enjoy this for 30 stinking years. You know? With a mortgage payment on top of that. You know, it's like... So I'm like, I'm going to come to ACM. I don't know exactly what, but I'm going to do production. I'm going to give it a shot. And I think while I was there, I started realizing... Actually, listening to, there's this podcast called... I'd worked on some films before actually doing the music, but I never actually considered I should do this as a career. It was just like a, you know, hey, we're going to film. No, you do music. Could you make some music for it? Sure, I'll try. You know? I started doing it, and then there was this moment where I saw this guy named Daniel James, and he's a composer who's done some video games like Metal Gear Solid 5 and a couple of films, like the most recent Terminator. And he was just talking about, you know, the music he'd worked on. And I was just seeing like how passionate he was about it, and also how simple his setup was. It's just him doing contact sample libraries and stuff on a very boss desktop computer. You know, like you always picture the film composer sitting there with sheet music and a wand conducting a giant gallery in Berlin of these musicians, and it's like, no, this dude's getting legit jobs, making legit money. You know, just off of his skill at composition and stuff. And I'm like, this just should be what I'm doing. I could totally do this. I've been doing this. I've never thought it was a career. And then it's kind of funny how it goes full circle, because then it starts coming back to being a kid at Walmart, watching Sonic Adventure 2, and just listening to the music. It was so good. I'm like, I could be that guy. I could be the one making the music. And I love narrative. I love storytelling. So it's great, because it's like, I finally found something that's like all my loves. It's like, I love film, I love video games, I love music. I could do all three with this magic profession of composition. So I'm like, that's what I need to do.
So did you realize that you wanted to be a composer like when you started at ACM, or did you like make the decision to come here?
I made the decision to come here not exactly knowing what I was doing, but knowing that it was much closer to my goal than broadcast journalism, which is what I was doing. I actually came kind of under the pretense that I was going to be an audio engineer. And I kind of did that, like pursued that internally for a while. And that's actually one of the good things about this school, is it taught me that I should not be an audio engineer. Like I can, I understand the craft and I can do it and I can mix, but an actual guy that like says that on their resume, you know, audio engineer, I don't think I have the
that's something that has... I came to that same conclusion, especially these past 2 semesters.
It put me too far away from where I wanted to be. It's like, so you're telling me I can move the kick drum mic, but I can't decide the chord change. And that bothered me, because I'm like, but the chords! Like, you know, like we were recording some band, and there was just a part in the bridge that they were doing, and I'm sitting there in my mind going, oh my gosh, it would be like 100 times better if we did this chord here and then that chord. Like my composition, my composer side of my brain that's been buried is like fighting to come to the surface. And I'm like telling myself, don't worry about that. You're supposed to worry about the
sound,
the kick drum bleed and everything else. And then I'm finally like, you know what? Forget the kick drum bleed. Let it bleed through. I don't care. Tell me about them chord changes. That's what I want to care about.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and the other hard part about that is that, like, at ACM, we don't necessarily have a, like, composition program. We have, like, a quasi-composition thing going so far, where it's, like, you can take film scoring, you can take composition lessons, you can take, like, some of these things that count towards that, but then, like, the rest of it is more on the engineering side.
Which I'm actually okay with doing the production program and having the engineering side, because you do need to know that stuff. And it's going to help my composition, you know? Because it's like the composition stuff, it's like, it'd be great to get like guided on that, but if that's your passion or something, that's going to be stuff you're learning anyway, because you're going to be doing it all the time. But the production stuff, especially when it gets technical, is some stuff that you might need someone to look at you and say, read this textbook.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like, the more that you gather, the more it helps.
The more you learn about one thing, the more you know about everything.
Yeah.
There's so many times I've learned something from, like, one discipline and then instantly started creating metaphors for another. And I think that's very valuable. Because sometimes you come to conclusions about maybe songwriting or, you know, composition or whatever the thing it is that you care about.
Yeah.
You come to conclusions about that while doing something completely unrelated. And you wouldn't have thought of it otherwise. It unlocks the part of your brain that wasn't thinking about it. You know, someone once told me that a music teacher I had when I was very young said that music unlocks the math part of your brain. And I do feel like when I started taking guitar lessons, my math classes got easier.
Yeah.
Because I just started understanding it a little more. Because now you're thinking about, you know, how mathematical rhythms can be. And to make that seem, put that in a fun way.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Just numbers.
Not just numbers. Although sometimes it really is just numbers.
Yeah, well, it depends how deep in the rabbit hole you go. Especially if you're doing serialism or whatever.
Yeah. The serialism is just math.
Yeah. But remember, at this point, I'm just listening to only AC/DC. So
Yeah,
I never
that's
encountered anything other than the 4/4 blues groove. So.
Yeah. How did you shift from going, like, just having this contemporary, like, rock and roll musical style to, like, eventually going into a more, like, compositional, almost classical approach?
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure I've actually left the rock and roll. I just did my first feature-length film. Scott and Crowley, A Comic Book Adventure. You should totally check it out. And it's...
I'll let you plug that. Yeah, that was weird. I'll let you plug that at the end again, but
okay,
continue.
It's a movie about these two comic book nerds, and they wanted a Scott Pilgrim vs. the World type of soundtrack. You think it's Expo Bomb. So they're like, punk rock in a garage, you know, so score it with guitars. And I'm like, well, that's funny you should ask that. Because I've never grown up from that. So, yeah, let's do those guitar things.
Yeah.
You know, and you look at something like the soundtrack for the latest Doom game, won Best Score at the Game Awards. And that is a guitar-heavy sound. But, no, I did start to realize... So I still have, you know, that kind of leaning or whatever, and I try to use that to my advantage, because maybe not everyone has that. Not everyone has that leaning. But transitioning more to the more orchestral stuff, what really got me was listening how epic it could be in films. Like I was trying to like make something epic, and I realized that you could just put a French horn in something, and then just over the top of it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now the hero's going to battle.
Yeah.
Before he was just kind of thinking about it. Now he's the sword is in his hand. When you hear that French horn come in, you know, or the strings, you know.
Yeah.
You think of bands like, I listened to a lot of Skillet when I was growing up, and they did they had an album called, and they still kind of do this, but the album called Comatose, where it was like rock and roll, but with cellos.
Yeah.
You know, they'd have like a string orchestra playing with them and stuff. Or, you know, Metallica did that album with the orchestra. So you can kind of see how they can go together, and having, realizing that it was okay to think outside the rock and roll box, and hearing just in films when they just go the epic route. Like, dude, I need some epicness in my music.
And a lot of times, like, I mean, if you listen to old, like, Beethoven stuff, it's really just, like, kind of metal.
Yeah, dude. Is it Toccata and Fugue? Oh,
yeah.
There's this one part where it's like, it sounds like Thunderstruck.
Guitar
is just this kind of like a pedal tone thing of arpeggios. I'm like, that's so metal. Like, Eddie Van Halen has played this.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another good example. Eddie Van Halen throws in licks from classical pieces.
Exactly.
And like in Eruption and everything else.
So it's all the
same. It's all the same. Full circle.
And then how have video games been an influence in your life?
Oh, gosh. as a there's somebody out there who's going to hear this and go, God, what a pathetic nerd. But there's definitely a lot of things that I owe in my life to video games. In that I never would have gone to X or discovered X or seen X if I had not first played video games.
Yeah.
You know, like I've had the opportunity to, I actually was paid to go to South by Southwest and cover a panel there for a video game website that I write for on the side. And I was just thinking about that. I'm like, and kind of some of the stuff I got to see there, and I'm like, I don't know if I would have got to do that if I wasn't writing for this video game site and they hadn't paid my way, you know, to go to this festival and check out all these things. And if I had gone, maybe I'd gone at, you know, different days. Or you think of, you know, friends that I've met in conversations I've started because of video games, or, you know, people I've met online because we share an interest in video games, or, you know, just some of the, like, just the persistence I think that video games teaches you. Especially when video games are hard, you still want to play, kind of thing. It's kind of like, here's my nerd moment. If you want to draw a life parallel from Sonic the Hedgehog, it's actually his health system. He doesn't have a health bar where you know, most games you get hit a certain number of times in a row and you're gone. With Sonic, as long as you have at least one ring, you can still keep going. Yeah. The idea is, in that game, you're always heading towards the goal. It's not so much about exploration as it is getting to the goal. And along that way, facing that goal, you run into stuff and you get hit. And when Sonic gets hit, his rings scatter everywhere. Yeah. It's like everything you have just kind of scatters everywhere. And then you're frantically picking up the pieces, trying to get it back together and keep going. And as long as you've just keep some of it. You don't have to keep all of it. You lose some, win some. As long as you keep some of it, you can still keep going infinitely. Yeah. It's not about how many times you get hit. It's about as long as you always get back up after you get hit and keep heading towards the goal, you can reach it. So there's Sonic, the philosophical.
I think that's awesome.
Sweet.
How is, since we're in the context of music and video games, what is your perception on how writing music for a video game as opposed to writing music for a film?
So the obvious thing is that film is completely linear and always the same. You will watch that film and it will never change. Yeah. Unless you're George Lucas and you just keep going back and changing the film.
Part of my original vision.
Yeah. You know, you move Han's head 3 centimeters to the left with this inhuman neck movement. Where with video games, there's that interactive nature of it, and the fact that you may lose and have to play something over and over again. So it's good to have some level of variety and just have variables. You know, I recently, playing video games for research, I did Uncharted 3, a level in Uncharted 3. That's 10 minutes long, and I probably played it like 12 times, just back to back in a row, and recorded all the footage, turned the sound effects off, just listen to what the music was doing. And I found that almost, in those 12 times, almost every time the music was never exactly the same. Yeah. They have something going on there where it's kind of like cycles through some playlists. They'll do a thing where they'll have a song that loops, but every time you play it, it'll start the loop at a different spot.
That's cool.
You know, it's not always, because the thing is, if you die and then you wake back up and the music starts again, you're going to hear the first 5 seconds of that song over and over again. So they'll do the thing, they'll skip to halfway through the song. Yeah. You know, and they also have a lot of points where the music kind of lends itself to going to something else. Yeah. So it's like there'll be a part where the music will build up and then it'll kind of boom, boom, kind of stop and then hit right back on the downbeat to a new section of the song. And that new section will change. Yeah. So they're looping at different spots, and then within that loop, they're cutting to different spots. And it's just really doing things to keep it dynamic and keep it interesting. Yeah. I think that's the biggest difference between film and video games.
Yeah.
Conceptually, at least.
Yeah. It's really cool. I love video games. You know I love video games.
Yes.
And I feel like you and I are like kindred spirits here at ACM that we're like, oh, we're the video game guys.
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of weird maybe because like, you know, I have a lot of friends talk about video games a lot, but like around here it's like, oh, I like mention a video game. I feel like, what? Oh, man. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I'm glad that we've taken a lot of classes together and like been able to at least share in the like, oh, how many of you are interested in like video game scoring? We're like, yeah.
That's also the cool thing is that we don't even play a lot of the same video games sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's even cool on top of that.
Yeah.
I'm not just getting, hey, here's Noah part 2. I can tell you all the conclusions you already know.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, hey, I'm Santiago and I have this different perspective coming from a different place, but we both love video games.
Yeah.
It's like, that's helpful. That's super cool.
To change gears entirely away from something lighthearted, what is, well, I mean, it can be lighthearted. What is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
Big. Yeah, let's unpack this. Okay, let's think here. So, I'd like to think that it plays into every part of my life. It shapes a lot of the way I think about things. I think you need some sort of outlet like that to look to. The teachings of Jesus Christ in the New Testament are particularly potent to me because that man had a way of seeing to the heart of the matter and cutting out a bunch of shallow BS that we like to focus on as humans, and he'd get right down to the heart and say, here's what matters, here's what's important, and he'd always bring it back to love. And I think it's very inspiring to me because I feel like I am not by instinct, always a loving person. But I think it's very important to be a loving person. And it's good to have someone to look up to that is loving. And it is hard to think of a better example than Jesus. The guy who's like, I love you so much, I'm going to die on this cross.
Sure.
And it's like, wow. The thing that I always loved the most was, it's like the ballsiest thing ever, is when Jesus is on the cross getting beat and he looks down at the people when he looks up at heaven and he says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, dude, you're nuts, man. You're getting dying like the most terrible death. And you're like, you should probably forgive these people. I'm like, what? That just goes against everything I understand as a selfish human. The tendency is not to do that. The tendency is to be like, screw you. I'm going to get even. And he's like, you know what, I forgive you. It's like, dude, especially like a crucifixion is like probably the most painful death you can have. You're literally hanging off your own weight and skin through nails. It's just like, and he's just forgiving people. That is incredible. That is very inspiring. So I try to always remember how Jesus did things, because his way is better than mine, better than ours. So I look to that a lot and try to remind myself of that. I think spirituality is very important. I also look at the teachings of someone like Gandhi, or that also like to focus on love and forgiveness and compassion, because those are important things. And I feel that in my life, the natural tendency is to not do those. But when I actually give a crap about love and compassion, it usually starts working out. Things start making sense. People respond to compassion. Yeah. Yet you think that after all these years I'd learned to just do it, but it seems like your default response is still, I'm angry. screw you, gentlemen. And it never gets you anywhere.
Yeah.
You know? And it's one of those things where you talk about it, and it's like every time you talk about it, it's like the right answer is always so obvious, but boy, do our emotions not care.
Yeah.
You know? Boy, do our emotions get heated up, and it's like, oh yeah. Especially with me, I had an incredible anger problem growing up, you know. I yelled and screamed at so many people. It physically would hurt some people, you know. Yeah, I got in a fight with my best friend one time.
Yeah.
Like, best friend since, like, kindergarten, whatever. And, like, there I am, like, we're punching each other in the face. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Especially when, like, it was me, you know, that would start these things.
Yeah.
I was just furious. I was just angry.
Yeah.
Because I didn't give a crap about love or compassion. I didn't care about, you know, I knew Jesus religiously or culturally.
Sure.
He's like raised in Oklahoma, small town Oklahoma. Congratulations, you're down with JC.
Yeah.
You know, that corn picking son of a gun at Sunday school. You know, it's like it's like the white Jesus from Idaho or whatever with the blue eyes. You know, it's like that's a Jesus I know. It's like, but at that point it's just like a culture thing. You're just like, oh yeah, we pray before we eat meals or whatever. It's like I didn't actually bother to read the stinking book and see how the guy actually got to the heart of the matter, what his actual like impetus was behind his actions.
Yeah.
Not that he was just some sort of regiment of like, so here are the rules for this culture you should follow. Because that was the Jesus I knew. And when I knew that Jesus, that false Jesus, he was an angry guy.
Yeah.
That gives you nothing but weird rules and crap.
Just a bunch of, like, you can't do these things.
Yeah, so, what is that? Congratulations. So then when I actually started getting more to the heart of the matter, that's when it started changing. That's when I started being more or less angry. And I feel like I'm still learning that. I feel like I'm still trying to unlearn the religious Jesus and not the actual Jesus. You know, and I feel like what's the ironic thing is that's what so many of Jesus' teachings were about. His conflict was with the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders of the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we think, like if Jesus came back today, the people he'd probably arguing with the most would be the people at churches.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did in his day.
Yeah.
You know, the Son of God comes, and then it's like, oh, you figured he'd be down with the guys reading the Torah and the Jewish leaders and stuff. No, those were like the people who claimed to know God were like the people he was butting heads with the most because they'd lost sight of what was important.
Yeah.
They had the religious ritual version, you know. They were doing it for themselves in their own glory. It was completely cultural. They'd lost sight of that it was about love and compassion, not about, you know, reading ancient texts in a courtyard, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what it's been for me, is unlearning that.
Yeah.
And how that affects, you know, my life and my decisions.
At what point in your life did that change from being a very, like, culturally, like, specifically religious thing to going to kind of more of a way of life that it's become for you?
It's been very gradual. Like, I don't know if there's ever a moment where it just, like, snapped. It's been a bunch of little moments along the way that have sort of, like, clicked. Because that's a big thing in some deep topics that I think a lot of times I think that's another problem, is we a lot of times like to paint it as this, like, and then the epiphany happened.
Sure.
You know, kind of thing. It's like, I think we forget about the process. You think of, you know, and I don't know how many, I'll try to make this simple in case, you know, anyone listening is not familiar with, you know, New Testament stories, but there's this guy named Paul who wrote a lot of the New Testament, and he was like, he hated Christians, and he like killed Christians at first and persecuted them. And then he's walking down this road, and then he has this moment where he's kind of like just confronted with God, and is kind of like blinded by God, and God's like, why do you persecute me? And then he has this big conversion and becomes this super Christian and stuff. sometimes that happens. And that's the ones we like to talk about because they're marketable. It's like, oh yeah, just 3 hours with this Jesus and now my life is amazing, you know. But I think even in Paul's own writing, when he talks about every day when we work out our salvation and all this, you start to see that there's a process.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just some flippy switch.
Yeah.
Or switch you flip.
A flippy switch.
A flippy switch. It's a process. It's a day-to-day thing of, you know, because it's a mind shift and a heart shift. And sometimes that takes some struggle and that takes some time. That takes you going like, and the hardest part, especially for someone like me, is it takes a lot of admitting that you're wrong. And that can be hard.
Yeah.
You know, and that can be just a subtle, well, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm just wrong about part of it. Okay, I'm wrong. You know, it's like, and sometimes that was 3 sentences. Sometimes that takes 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, of unlearning that. But I think the biggest shift for me was, I think, the summer between 6th grade and 7th grade when I was about to go into middle school. And I just kind of realized, I hate everyone, and everyone hates me. That's not a good existence.
Yeah.
What am I doing wrong? And I'm like, I've had this Jesus thing in front of me this whole time. And, you know, the message I hear is of the love and compassion and what it can do, but that's not at all how I see it or how I view it or what I care about. I should care about that.
Yeah.
I should get to the heart of that. That's what I should be doing. And that was like the first shift where it was like, I need to look at Christ for real. You know, I need to look at love for real. And then over that time, that's when I also, you know, came into like the, you know, people like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, who also were preaching messages of love. And you're just like, man, there's something to this, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's even like, you can narrow it down as small as Jesus, or you can like narrow it bigger or widen it to the idea of just love in general. Is kind of what I'm going to hear you're saying.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, I think Jesus was like the epitome of that love and is the epitome of that love. And that some people along the way that there's just something there, man. And some people have tapped into it, you know. And sometimes those people aren't coming from a traditional, you know, appropriate Christian background.
Sure.
Like the fact that I'm even saying anything slightly positive about Gandhi would make a lot of people mad that would say, hey, I'm a Christian, you know. And they'd be like, it's like, yeah, I follow Jesus. You follow Jesus too, yeah. Gandhi has some cool stuff too. And they'd be like, no, Noah, Gandhi was a sinner. Gandhi was the devil. And it's like, I mean, he said good things about Jesus too.
Yeah.
You know? And the important thing is, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you can't be afraid to look at something that isn't surface level what you are and then write it off because on the underneath the skin, it might be the same as what you are, you know, kind of thing. It's like, yeah, Gandhi may have come more from like a Hindu side of things, and the label you could give him would be more Hindu. If you scratch underneath it and start looking at some of the stuff you're saying, it's like, yeah, that Christ thing, he's tapping into that.
Yeah.
He's absolutely tapping into that spirit of love and compassion. He's found it there, you know. Or something like, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., that one's more direct because he's straight up quoting, you know, Bible passages and stuff from Jesus. But, you know, that's another one of the principles of Jesus that I like so much, is that he didn't give a crap about the surface. He always got to the heart of the matter. And I think that's something easy to do with somebody like Gandhi, is to write him off for surface level things and ignore the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter, he was saying, hey, don't be a jerk to your fellow humans. It's like, yes, that is a good thing to say.
Yeah.
Why would I condemn somebody encouraging love and compassion? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, we see a lot of that, I mean, especially lately, that there's this just like really big surface conflict, and the people aren't willing to move past
the
this.
internet's
like,
so bad about that.
Yeah,
because you can never get past it. I noticed your Facebook profile says this under political views.
Yeah,
let's have an argument about that without me actually getting to bother to know what you think.
Exactly.
It's just like the labels. Gosh, I'm so tired of the labels. Mm-hmm. It's like, are you a suchanist? Do you believe in suchanism or whatever? It's like, because I'd rather argue with that label than actually can talk to a fellow human. You know, It's like we set up these labels as like brick walls in front of each other, so that if I'm looking at you, I'm not seeing your face. I'm seeing a brick wall that says, liberal or commie or whatever I want to think. And so then that way, when I throw grenades over the wall, it's so much easier because I'm not seeing the human face that I'm about to kill.
Yeah.
It's so easy to dehumanize people with all these labels. And the labels are surface level. It's like something Neil deGrasse Tyson said when he was talking about, somebody like asked him, are you an atheist? And he was talking about it. And he was saying, yes, but I just want to make it clear that just saying, are you an atheist, yes or no, and then labeling me that is an intellectually lazy way to get to know me.
Yeah.
It's like you could just say, are you this? Are you that? Check yes or no. Okay, now I can make all these presumptions about you. It's like, man, these labels can mean so many different things to many people. Yeah. And people using those labels may not even know what they mean. It's like there's no hard definition. It's like, get to know the person, have a conversation. Don't use that label as a cowardly way to avoid knowing what someone actually thinks.
Yeah.
Are you afraid that if you actually talk to them, they might say something that's going to challenge what you're going to say? Like I said earlier, it's hard to admit you're wrong. And sometimes I think those labels are protections, ways of barriers of putting up to protect us from admitting we're wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I've been noticing that of myself a lot lately, and that, like, while I don't spend a whole lot of time arguing with people on the internet, I still, like, see a comment and be like, oh, that person's probably this label or something, Yeah. How do we get past these labels?
We do what we're doing right now. We sit down and have conversations. That's gross, Noah. That's hard. I don't like that solution. I'd rather write a mean comment. And that's the thing. It's most things in life, the good solution, it can get yucky and boring, and you have to actually get off and do something. It's so much easier to just write a comment, And the other thing is, and at the very least, understand that there is more under the surface. Because you can't just always just sit down like we're doing right now. It's like, all right, we've got 2 hours to just talk about whatever the heck we want. You can't just run into this random person and have that all the time.
Yeah.
So at the very least, acknowledge that things aren't always what they seem at face value, or that there may be a reason why they think this way, and to just value other people at some point. Like, the tendency is, as soon as somebody says something, to go, that's not me, therefore dumb. When it's like, I think the way you should approach it is approach things thinking, here's the thing, how can I learn from this? How can I use this to improve myself? How can I use this to better me and others? And that's the thing you can do. And don't get me wrong, like, there's some stuff that you're just going to hear like, yeah, that's garbage. That's trash. That's nothing. But I find that our threshold of what is garbage is so stinking high.
Yeah, well, that's
it's
true.
Like anything that isn't a mirror image of us is garbage. It's like, maybe not, It's maybe sometimes we need something to just show us, to have a reflection, but something to show us the flaws so we can start chiseling it out,
Yeah.
And we can't be afraid of that.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned, like, the value of, like, a person, that whenever someone says something, like, that you disagree with, you, like, just instantly devalue them.
Because they can have a wrong opinion and still be a decent human being. There's plenty of people who I'm like, I listen to them say something like, I so don't agree with that, and then I'll see them do something, and I'm like, wow, that was a very humanitarian thing to do that I never even thought of doing.
Mm-hmm.
So screw me and my correct opinions.
Yeah.
Or, this guy's got the actions to back it up,
Mm-hmm. How do you, I guess, choose, or how do you value people around you? That was very broad. But
yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, what is the value of people around you? Do you care about people? Do you want people to be happy, or are you just kind of focused on yourself and just like, nah, I'm gonna just work on me and y'all stay over there?
I'm completely focused on myself. It's like I was talking about earlier, the tendency is to focus on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you got to learn to not value what they're doing. Illustration, somebody put it to me that I liked a lot was, it was a speaker who was talking, and there was probably 20 people in the room. Let's just say 20 people. And he says, if you're looking out for just yourself, then there's one person looking out for you. But if everyone decides to look out for each other, then you have 19 people looking out for you.
Yes.
For you. So it's like, well, hot dang, why don't we look out for other people? We'll look out for each other and help each other that way. Yeah. Which goes such against survival instinct that we have as lizard brain monkey things. It's like, he has coconuts. We need coconut. Me whack over the head with club and take coconuts. When it's more like, hey, what if we establish some kind of system where we could both benefit from the coconuts? Like, hey, man, you have any coconuts? Yeah, sure. I'll give you some. So that later when he needs some, he can ask you. And later when you need some, it's it's that kind of thing. And I think one thing that's really tough, because I'm so bad about that, it's one thing that's really helped teach me that is just having a girlfriend. Being in a relationship where it's been you your whole life. You have to answer for you and you alone. Then all of a sudden there's this other person, and it's suddenly I becomes we, and us, and you're like, I'm like, this can't work if I only care about myself. And I think being with my girlfriend for 4 years has taught me a lot about learning to care about others. And I catch myself doing stuff, and I'm like, wow, I'm really going, I'll catch myself in the middle of it. Wow, I'm really going out of my way for her and not myself, And I'm like, I would not have done this years ago.
Yeah.
Which goes back again to the idea of this process. Of, continual refinement and just trying to get better. Man, we like to write off stuff so as if human beings never change, as if something
sure.
I saw something on Twitter the other day, and this guy was stating something, and it was a political opinion, and then somebody takes a screenshot of a tweet that guy made in 2015. It says, or no, it was more like 2014. He's like, oh yeah, well here you said the opposite of that, and he's like, yeah, that was 3 years ago. I've changed it. I was wrong. And it's like, oh, and the guy goes, that's convenient. No, that's not convenient. That's how time works. Yeah. It's like, everything grows or decays,
Yeah.
So, I don't know why people act like it just stays the same.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to embrace the fact that you can always know more and always understand more and always love more.
Yeah. And there's this conflict of how, if you start embracing certain ideas that, start fitting within this other box that people start disagreeing with, then, it also just writes off everything else that, so like
I was talking earlier about giving Gandhi some credit.
Exactly.
Afraid to give Gandhi credit, and then that means you're writing off Christ. It's like, not necessarily.
And as someone changes over time, maybe some years ago you would have been like, oh no, well, we just got to look out for ourselves or something. But maybe as you grow and start loving more, you start going oh, maybe we should care about each other or something. But that illustration that you lined up is very a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, oh, that's just communism, And it's like, bam, put in a box that everyone already hates, and that makes it real easy
Makes it easy.
Yeah.
Makes you lazy.
How do you express yourself to other people to have them see you more than just these labels?
It's a good question. For one, I tend to avoid proclaiming the labels just outright as that.
Mm-hmm.
I avoid that as the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, how does spirituality play in your life? I didn't say, well, I'm a post-Reformation Protestant, this, that, you know, or just like get some like crazy label.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know if those fit me because I don't care. And it's like, quit using the labels.
Mm-hmm.
I try to, again, it's the Jesus thing, you get into the heart. When I'm presenting myself, I want to make sure I'm presenting the central idea of, and the core of why I'm doing this, not, well, here's a surface level label that I give you first, you know, like I don't, like when you go to my Facebook profile, whatever, I don't think it says like religious views, political views, because I'm like, what is that going to do? I'm feeding into the label game.
Yeah.
I don't want to feed into that. You know? I want it to be, if anyone wants to know, you know, kind of where I think, that they can't just look at that label, that they have to ask me, like we're doing right now. Because then you can start a conversation. And when you start a conversation, you can also see where the other person comes from. See how you can learn from that. Yeah, so that makes sense.
And how have these like points of view, if at all, how have these points of views changed how maybe you make music, or I don't know if you like write songs or whatever, but
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, embracing other ideas absolutely affects the way you do music. It's a very Hindu concept of reincarnation and like circular. And I think, if I don't want to like pin everything down, but a lot of Eastern cultures does kind of think of things as more circular in a lot of ways. You know, obviously not in everything, but I think they care about the circle more than we seem to do in the West. Everything's a line or a square. They like them curves, yo. But no, so I remember hearing that in a culture class I was taking and thinking about how that affects music. How to think of music less linear and more circular. I watched this, I went to Indian Night at the university I used to go to. And it was this dude with a sitar and a dude with a tabla. The guys have never met before in their life. They sit down and they played 30 minutes of the dopest jams I've ever heard in my life. And it's just 30 minutes of just one key. And it never stops. It's not linear form. It's circular. It just keeps repeating and repeating. I'm like, I would say it is the coolest music I have ever heard in my life. I have not heard better music since then.
Dang.
And I wish I had the recording, because I'm just like, that was the greatest thing I've ever heard. And it's crazy those guys hadn't even met before. So yeah, that absolutely affects me. Now I'm like, dude, circles are a thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, you look at other ideas in other cultures and you're like, how can I imitate that in music? You look at, you know, just the way you think about things. I think I was very, you know, we were talking about being selfish earlier. You know, working in a band, that was a bad thing, is that I would dislike other people's ideas if it was my song, because it was about me.
Sure.
Then as I learned to not be selfish, I'll do something where like, hey, what if we did this in the bridge? And I'm like, absolutely, we should do that in the bridge. That's freaking great. I hadn't thought of that. Or before, because the fact that I wouldn't have thought of that, thought of that on my own, that instantly pushed it off, because it's like, this has to be me, and it has to come from me. The idea of being less selfish.
Yeah.
You start to embrace other people's ideas, for collaboration in music, and I think that's an example of how a shift in personal view has changed a shift in composition.
And then, of course, the last question: what advice do you have for people?
Whew, hot dang! Well, kind of to just make this all one big motif. Get to the heart of things. Yeah. And don't care so much about the surface. Mm-hmm. And learn to love like Jesus did. Yeah. Learn to be compassionate and stop thinking about yourself so much. Yeah. All the things we've been talking about. I think that is the best advice. The best advice is to do those things. Because when you start shifting your mind towards that direction, it absolutely changes things. Always have hope. Always think that if you don't have hope, then it's not going to go anywhere because you don't think it's going to go anywhere. You're not willing to try. If you think you have a chance, then that's going to motivate you to actually do the thing that you need to do. So that's what I would say is put love first, always hope, and just believe that good will win in the end. That doesn't seem like practical advice. It's like you're sitting there looking at your credit card bill like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this. Just put love first. It's like, that doesn't help me. No, what are you talking about? So that's the very zoomed out advice that if you start doing that, if you go to it at that level, then over time, the little pieces start falling into line more and start making more sense. And you will start to kind of know where to go. The other thing is, advice is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to learn. Always ask questions. Because really it's like, you know, the fact that you're asking for advice, that's good. That's how you get advice. You have to ask. You know? If someone needs advice and isn't asking, they're not going to get it. Ask and you shall receive. So ask for advice. Always have hope. Put yourself last and love first. There you go. There's excellent. There's the elevator version.
Noah, thank you for doing this with me.
Sure.
Where can we find your music, all the stuff that you make, all the stuff you've worked on?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Noah Copeland, or you can go to noahcopeland.com, where you will see some of the films I've worked on and the video games I've worked on, as well as some sound design that I've done as well. And that's where all my stuff is. I just recently worked on a film called Scott and Crowley, a comic book adventure that is coming out to the next couple weeks.
Sure.
Check that out. It'll be at film festivals. It'll be online. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to be posting about it crazy at the moment that Floodgate releases. So check me out there.
Awesome. Again, thank you for doing this with me.
It's fun.
I'm Santiago Ramones. You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I also make music. Also, if you want music for your film or video game, you can ask Noah or myself.
Or both.
Or both. Exactly.
We just did a film where we composed, each composed bits and pieces of it. So
cool. I always end every podcast with my 3 things, sort of my advice for people. And it sort of shapes the way that I live my life, which those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.